Hi, welcome to Shared Frequencies and the Space Between, where heart meets brain and life happens in the messy middle.
We're two best friends navigating a new chapter, sharing a space, finding our rhythm and tuning into life's transitions.
This is a space for deep and meaningful conversations about growth, connection, and everything in between. Let's tune in to today's frequency. Hi, and welcome to episode 8. We have called this episode The Space Between Then and Now, a mental health check-in. As always, I'm Elle.
And I'm Don.
And today's episode is a little different. I think we're playing a little bit around with what format and just trying to find our rhythm and
find our frequency.
Finding our frequency, exactly. And I think this is something that we've talked a lot about recently.
Yes.
And I think this is a really important conversation, but I also think it's really important for where we find ourselves right now.
For sure.
Hence the topic. Disclaimer off the top. I've just finished watching an episode of Germany's Next Top Model. So my head is going to be very linguistically confused. So who knows what might come out tonight.
If you start speaking German, I will just look at you strangely because I don't speak German.
Yeah, I don't think it'll necessarily be German that comes out, but there might be a couple of words where I'm like, oh, actually, this word might be better describing it, or be like, what's this word in English? Who knows? We'll see. But we'll just take it as it comes.
Yeah.
As always.
Absolutely. So, where do we want to start?
I think that's a really good question. I think like just an organic sort of conversation about it. But we called it The Space Between Then and Now.
Yes.
Because we talked about in the quick prep.
Yeah.
We talked about giving a little bit more of a detailed background of what our experiences have been with mental health. And I think there's definitely some deep dives that we can do there. Is there anything in particular that sort of like comes up for you when the subject of mental health comes up? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, in general, it's something that I have become a lot more mindful of, a lot more aware of. And I mean, I touched on this in a previous episode, but I had a full-blown mental breakdown
physical breakdown.
Yeah, when I was in my mid-20s. I was working a high-pressure job in the financial services. I thought I was invincible. I was young. I thought I was invincible. So, but even though I'd kind of gone through that, and it took me a long time to recover from that. You know, I don't exaggerate when I say I say I lost 10 years of my life. Yeah. You know, to that. You know, so I had a total body and mind shutdown. My parents had to drive to Edinburgh, where I was working at the time, and come and get me and take me home. You know.
Do you remember?
To Inverness.
Do you remember anything from that day?
Or
from that period?
Very, very little. So what happened was I'd been working on a massive project. We'd come to the end of the project. I was standing up in front of all senior management, executive, etc., to give my debrief on it. And I just broke down, crying like a baby, standing up at the podium, getting ready to deliver my debrief. And my memories from then, and even for a few weeks afterwards, are patchy at best, you know.
Do you know if you were aware of where you were? Like, were you were you conscious that you were back home in your
Yes.
childhood home?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
I was conscious that my parents had come and got me, but it was like dipping in and out of a dream. You know, and yeah, I mean, for the best part of 2 years, I barely said a handful of words in any given day. I didn't move for most of the day. I refused professional help. So because this would have been 20 odd years ago, when it doesn't get given the same focus as what it does now. Mental health
Yeah, I
doesn't
didn't have the same validity.
Yeah, so it took me best part of 2 years before I was stringing proper sentences together and stuff. I wasn't moving. I was totally sedentary. I was gaining weight hand over fist. I was just a shell of myself. But I was conscious of the fact that this wasn't right, and I've said to you before, people, there's a phrase that's used which is not very pleasant, and people kind of shirk at it, and that's the phrase is like when you tell somebody to pull themselves together.
Yeah.
But it's actually, and certainly my experience of it is fairly accurate, because it's like an out-of-body experience. It was like I was looking down on myself going...
Oh, as in like, it's not pull yourself together, it's pull the pieces of you back
to
into...
so pull your head and your body back together, because it's like you're watching yourself going...
So finding the pieces of yourself.
No, the pieces were there. I mean, I was conscious of looking at myself, as I say, that's like almost out of body. It's almost like I was hovering over myself, watching myself going, what are you doing?
Like, so it wasn't disassociation.
No.
It was an out of body experience.
So looking at myself going like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, just get up, just do something, just talk, but it couldn't bring the body to react.
That's interesting.
So since then, and having spoken to people and whatnot, and spoken to professionals and spoken to doctors and stuff like that, they were saying I pretty much had I've been running on adrenaline for so long. It was and then that came to an end. So I didn't have that, and my body had been used to running on that. So it was just kind of like, it just shut down. It was just the system just kind of went, well, I don't have what I need to run, so I'm just going to shut down. I'm not getting that adrenaline, that drug to operate on, so that was that. And then, as I say, it took me 10 years before I was not back to normal, but I was in a state where I was fully functioning adult again in the world.
Yeah.
That was really tough. And then, and then in the last couple of years, again, I've been struggling a bit. I had a smaller episode in October last year, where I was driving and I had a mini blackout, and then realised that once again I was in a high stress situation, a lot of my stuff on my plate, and thought I had it under control, and I didn't. And that was burnout.
Yeah. And that's really what you've been working with, like working towards getting out on the other side of for the past 6 months.
Yes.
Right.
Since the beginning of October last year. So I quit the job that I was in. And decided to make the move down here. Not because of that, but it provided the opportunity.
But you also actually sought out professional help this time
Yeah,
around.
I did. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm older, wiser, whatever you want to be. But yeah, I went and, I got signed up with a therapist, got help, and only 4 weeks ago, stopped regularly doing that, partly because my therapist retired.
Yeah.
But she also was confident that I was on the right track. So just like another couple of bits of information to kind of throw in on it all. The last 5-6 years within my family, there's been a lot of tragedy. So I lost a brother. Shortly after that, I lost my mother, and then just over a year ago, I lost my father.
Yeah.
And I don't do grief well.
No, you don't.
I never have done. And I've still not fully grieved for any of those.
No.
And that, but and the loss in itself is huge, but it changes family dynamic.
Yes, it does.
And all these things that kind of also come into play on it as well. So, so that was also happening, and when you look back on it and the ridiculous things that I did, so like when my dad passed away, I was so busy and whatnot with work and so tight, and there was important stuff going on with work that
you made yourself really busy, and you prioritized. You could have stepped away.
Oh, I could. Yeah. Oh, I could have stepped away.
Yeah.
There's always the option to step away.
You were not that busy, and you were not irreplaceable. I'm not saying the job you did
in my head.
Yeah, exactly.
In my head. Yeah.
I'm not saying that the role that you played within that project wasn't vital. It definitely was.
Yeah.
But there were measures there you could absolutely
and it was a critical
away.
time for the project, and I was just like, I didn't take the time to step away.
No, you didn't. You didn't prioritize stepping away.
No, I didn't prioritize stepping away. So that's kind of been going on as well. And I'm also a qualified life coach and NLP practitioner. Which is great, but using those things on yourself, I wasn't very good at. Which is a bit strange, because the reason I went and got those qualifications was when I was coming out the tail end of my previous thing, and I was looking at ways and finding tools to help to better deal with things and to better frame things and whatnot. So I did my life coaching. With the NLP, along with the NLP, so as I had those tools for myself. It was never done with the intention of that being what I went to do for a living or etc. But then clearly I wasn't using the tools.
No, but I also think
available.
that there's a difference there, right? Because you got the tools when you were just out on the other side and you're starting that healing process. But when you're in the midst of it and you're in that downward spiral, you don't always catch yourself.
No.
And you can't necessarily put those practices or those tools into practice, because you're right in the midst of it.
Yeah.
And that's where someone external, come in. Sometimes just reminding you, going, hey,
for sure,
just do that check-in.
So and I mean, and don't make it wrong, like I don't pin blame on other people. These were decisions that I made. These were environments that I chose to be in. Could things have been handled differently by others within that? Absolutely, but ultimately,
in the last one,
ultimately, if my mental health is my priority, it's for me to look after it in the first instance.
Absolutely.
But I do think we need more catch nets, safety nets for when people don't.
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, my sister just had a really beautiful experience. So her work has been insanely crazy over the last few months. And there's been a lot happening over the last few months, just in general for her. And she has like a buddy that she's partnered up with in work. And this lady came and she was like, don't you think that you should maybe book some holidays in March? And I was just like, no, it's fine. And she's like, no, I think you should look at booking a holiday. And she goes, oh, well, no, we're not really planning on going anywhere. And like her colleague just sat her down and like grabbed her and was like, I am telling you, you need to step away. Yeah. You don't have to go anywhere. A holiday, like stepping away, taking a holiday from work doesn't mean that you have to go away on a holiday. You could just spend a week at home with your family, relaxing, recharging. You need to step away. You're headed for stress. You're headed for burnout. You need to step away. I am telling you, you need to book a holiday. Yeah. And it wasn't until it was pointed out in that way, my sister was like, oh, actually, you're right. Yeah. I do need to step away. But because her colleague was keeping an eye on her, they were buddying up, right? They were partnering together, but they were also, relying and supporting each other in that manner, that her colleague saw the signs of stress starting to creep in and overwhelm starting to creep in. And therefore, she was like, listen, you need to step away. Yep. Get that annual leave booked in. You need to step away. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So that's kind of my history of mental health, and where it's been for me. And, that initial breakdown that I had, when I look back on it, it's very possible there was a very high element of burnout in that as well. Yeah. But it came about at the end of the big project, the pressure, etc. Yeah. And that was the environment that back then, the organisation that I worked for, 1 in 10 employees would suffer at least one breakdown at some point.
Sorry, 1 in 10?
1 in 10 employees.
So 10% of their employees...
10% of their employees would suffer a breakdown at some point in their career, in the time of their organisation. Yeah. Yeah.
That is not acceptable numbers.
It's absolutely not. But that's what the numbers were.
Do you know what the numbers are today? Don't disclose what it is.
I don't know what they are today.
Okay. It can't be that.
No, it won't be that. It won't be.
10%.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. But back then, the attitude, certainly within the financial services, was, we pay you great money, we expect you to give everything.
We own your soul.
Yeah, pretty much. That was the environment.
That's crazy.
Right or wrong, but people knew what they were getting into. People knew what they were signing up for. But nobody thinks that they will be that 1 in 10. Nobody thinks they will be one of that 10%. Everybody, especially when you're young and younger.
Yeah, where you're like, 10% has a mental breakdown. That means that 90% doesn't. Yeah. That's fine.
And you also think, it's generally people who have been here a long time, decades that have the breakdowns. It takes that long to happen, so. And for me, being busy is not the stressor. It's the stress comes from the trying to think the best way. It's the consequences of you not doing your job, or the consequences of something not being completed or being done. It's not the being busy in and of itself. I can be busy all day, every day. We've had periods like that as when we worked together, where we were just really busy, But that's not the stressor for me. It's that responsibility element of it. So like when you're in a situation where there's a lot resting on your shoulders, whether you've put that on your own shoulders or not, and we often a lot of what sits on our shoulders we put there ourselves. Yeah. That's where the stress becomes damaging for me.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Do you think that's 100% the truth? Do you think that's what it is? Or do you think it's because the more responsibility you feel, the less willing you are to focus on your own needs, and you therefore don't prioritize yourself, including your own health? Because I think your mental health is extremely connected with your physical health. So when you get really busy, but busy because you're feeling responsible for a project, responsible for people, you forget to eat right and you don't move.
They are absolutely consequences of doing that. And I think it can kind of fall into, there's a couple of ways to look at that, and I think some people will fall into it slightly different than others. Some people will do that to deliberately avoid looking after themselves and taking care of their own issues. And some people take that responsibility, and the result of that is that they then start neglecting themselves. It's not the reason.
So the chicken and egg bit.
So, and I think for me, it's absolutely, because I know how to take care of myself. I enjoy taking care of myself. And, again, we mentioned it before, I've got a son diagnosed, but it's like fairly certain I have.
It's very obvious.
It's very certain I have ADHD. So I think I very quickly fall into that. I will deprioritize myself because I'm busy. I won't go looking to be busy to avoid prioritizing myself. During lockdown, I was really good at taking care of myself. Because we had really structured days, because we would because
there was no external responsibilities.
No.
There was no one pulling you hither and thither.
There was. As I said, we were busy. We kept ourselves busy through work and taking on projects and taking on extra responsibility. We were both at one point in time doing the jobs of two people pretty much.
Let's be honest, compared to the rest of our team, we were doing the job of 5 people each.
But actually having more than one hat. On it, so and it's not that I don't want to be taking care of myself and whatnot. It's just that I do.
That you forget.
I forget, I forget, and then when I go, it's just easy for me to go. I'd rather let me down than let somebody else down. And if that means parking my well-being, physical, mental, whatever it be, then that's what happens, And after my first break, I ballooned to over 35 stone. Couldn't walk to the end of the 50 feet or so to the end of the garden and my parents. But I bounced back from that. Lost a tremendous amount of weight. Did 3 what we call beast races, which are the tough mudder, obstacle course, 10K obstacle course type events. During my recovery, I went and climbed a mountain. Walked up a mountain, climbed it. I set off that day, and I'd messaged friends to go, I'm going to go up with us today, and they were like, "What are you doing? You've not done anything like that in years. No preparation. You're going to die." And I'm going, no, I'll be fine. Now, it's one of the easier Munros in Scotland to go up and down, one of the safer ones to go up and down.
Yeah, that too.
But it's still a fair hike. So I was just like, if I don't make it to the top, at least I will have a gauge of how far I get, But I made it to the top, and safely. I made it back down again safely. I then slept in the car for 2 hours before I could go anywhere.
Because you needed to be able to safely drive
yes,
back.
so so it's and again, over the last couple of years, I've stopped prioritizing my mental and physical health, and very fortunate this time that I didn't end up to the same extent as it was.
No, but I also think that's a credit to the work that you have been doing
Yeah.
ever since you got out on the other side of it, because you were not willing to listen in the run-up to it.
Yes.
Right, because there were several warning bells and alarms going off, and we had so many conversations about it, but you were just not willing to digest that. You're not willing to take it, or unable to. I don't know which one. But you were not able to take that in and actually make that pivot, right? But then you got to the point that you got to, and you had no chance. You could absolutely have powered on, which is I'm pretty sure is what you did the last time. But this time you knew what was on the other side of that, and you listened. Your body was like a last chance, buddy. You listen now and you act now.
Yes.
Or else.
Yeah.
And that's what you did, right?
Absolutely.
I called the doctor immediately.
I called the doctor absolutely immediately. Actually, no, that's a lie. I didn't. I was closer to the doctors than I was to home, so I just drove to the doctor's surgery, and then went in and went, I've just had this episode, and they were really helpful and told me to go home and wait for a phone call.
What do you mean you're blacked out? Please go into your car and drive back home again.
Yeah. We don't do drop-in appointments. So that day I managed to, because then when the doctor phoned me, it was just like, right, you need to come in immediately, and I was just like, yeah, that's cool, because I'm actually sitting in the car park, waiting for the call, so I will come in straight away. Spoke to the doctor. They put me in touch with they have a crisis line type thing where you immediately get to start speaking to somebody. And then I got the referral to the therapist, and was working with her. So that was, I absolutely, at that moment, it's, again, was it a bit later than I should have done it? Absolutely. But I still did it.
No, exactly.
I still,
exactly.
And I still
and you took the right steps, and you asked for help.
Yeah. So that's my mental health elevator pitch.
So where do you feel like you're at now? Like if you should say, if we use that clock analogy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where between 12 and 3 is when you're really good.
Yeah.
From 3 to 6, that's when you're starting to feel a dip, but you can pick yourself up again by doing, what feels really good for you, whatever that is, retail therapy or a self-care thing, or go for a run, or go for a walk, or cook a nice meal, or whatever that self-care thing is for you. From 6 to 9, that's when you're in the pits of it, that you can't get out yourself, you need help. And then from 9 and back up to 12 is when you're out on the other side of that darkness, but you're still working your way through it, but you can now see the light ahead of you, and you're like, where do you feel like
I think the last time that we checked in with each other on this, I was probably sitting about 10:30, and I think I'm pushing now to 11:30. I'm still mindful, of what I've been through, what I've come through, and again, I've taken the time out, to allow myself to recover for my energy to return to get my head straight, you know. So as well as speaking to people, I've you know, so when I walked away from the job, I didn't just go immediately and jump into doing something else. I realized that I needed,
you unplugged.
Yeah, I unplugged. You know, so, and the last 2-3 weeks, I've really felt progress. I felt my energy returning.
Yeah.
You know, and again, it's just that it's also that keep on listening to myself, because I forget when it wasn't. I had that day where I was just like, I am just like, my body just wants to rest and heal and sleep.
Yeah, I mean, you had that over Christmas, right? You had that the 23rd of December, 2 days after arriving down, when you literally spent like 23 hours in bed.
Yeah.
And then you had one again like 3 or 4 days after you arrived down. So that first week.
Yeah.
Where you also were just like, I can't move.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it's fine. You're right on schedule.
Yeah. You know, so, and it is, and you just feel it. And it's just like, when I wake up in the morning, I want to get up.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not doing that whole, I'm just going to lie here. I don't have anything to do. You know, no, I want to get up. You know, I'm on the hunt for a new job. And yeah, it's just, you know, I joined the local camera club.
You did.
You know, so there's I'm the mojo is returning.
Yeah.
And a lot quicker than what I did previously, because I've taken the right steps.
Exactly. Yeah. No, exactly. No, I've definitely, like, over the last 3 weeks. So you've been down 3.5 weeks, almost 4 weeks. On Sunday coming, right? Next week is 4 weeks.
4 weeks, yeah.
It's like 3.5 weeks. There's been a vast difference from like when you arrived down, and then to the last couple of days, like over the last week or so. Like there's been a vast difference.
And it is, and it's the little things that you notice, and that you kind of catch yourself doing something, a positive thing, or a glimpse of your old self thing. And then it starts to happen more often. So things like dancing to the music in the supermarket, you know, and stuff like that, where you just kind of go, oh, okay, you know, that's that pep and back in my step again, you know, sing along to music in the car. Things like that you kind of catch yourself doing, and when you're conscious that you maybe haven't done them for a while, you know, that's not the headspace that I've been in. So things like that, you know, and more and more and more and more of those like moments of the old me, you know, the good old me, not the old me that doesn't take care of itself and neglect itself. But yeah, but you know what else as well? It's the, you know, you've been really, really like a rock for me in that, you know, both in the moments when, you know, when I lost my mum, when I lost my dad, you know, in those dark moments, you know, you've been an absolute pillar for me. You're the one that pesters me to look after myself. You know, you know,
that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. You know, and
forcefully persuading you to.
You know, but that's the respect that I have for you, that you can get through to me, you know, and stuff like that. So yeah, you know, that's been, it's been invaluable. It's been invaluable, and it's just, and I think that's also helped speed my recovery. You know, this last, you know, well, since October last year. You know.
Because you called me as you were waiting for the call for the doctor. I just arrived back up. I had been down helping a friend move from outside of London up to Leicester.
Yeah.
So that was a 3-hour drive.
Yeah.
And I just returned back. I'd literally been up really early, flying back, got back in, was like, okay, I have an hour and a half. I can cram in a nap and then I can get things done and I can prep. And then I literally just laid down for like half an hour.
Yeah.
And I got your call.
Yeah.
And within 45 minutes of being in a dead sleep, I was in my car.
On the way.
With everything, like, I hadn't even unpacked my bag. Normally that's the first thing when I come home. I come home, I put my bag on my bed and I empty it for everything. I hadn't done that. I was so tired. I hadn't done that. So like a whirlwind, I zoomed around my kitchen and just threw anything I had of edible stuff into a bag. And I was just like, right, okay, you know, I have the next 4 or 5 meals prepared, so we don't have to worry about that. I've got dinner tonight, I've got breakfast tomorrow, I've got lunch tomorrow, I've got dinner tomorrow, and I've got breakfast planned for the following day. So it's not until we get to lunch on day 2 that, you know, we actually have to get out and start thinking about food. And just grabbed clothes and extra dog food. And then went up the road, packed my work stuff, called my manager and was like, I know I'm supposed to be in the office tomorrow, but I really need to be in Inverness. Would you mind if I work from home?
From up there,
and she was like, yeah, of course.
And that's great. You know, that's what we need more of in the world. You know, friends will drop stuff for friends and you know, but we need more support from within work spaces and whatnot that allows that, you know. I mean, there's always the risk that people take advantage of it, but I think that's a risk that is worth it to ensure.
Oh, absolutely. Like the mental health of your employees, of your team is really important, because them feeling safe and supported and valued will have them stay I don't want to say productive and loyal, but productive and loyal, right? They will feel safe, and therefore they will feel comfortable, and therefore they will be in a really good place to actually perform their job, whatever their job is.
I one of the earliest things I was taught, you know, potentially my toughest ever boss was my first ever boss, but he was also the fairest. Yeah. You know, and you know, there's lots of snippets of things he said to me during my time with him, and one of the ones that stuck with me was like, he didn't want staff giving 100%, because that, you know, because staff who given 100% don't last. Yeah. You know, and you know, so, and that was, as I say, you know, he wants people who come in, they do their work, they you know, you'll have busy times, you'll have quiet times, whatever it be, but he doesn't want people burning out. You know.
Because, I mean, ultimately, that's really expensive for whatever company you have, right? Like in a team meeting, like the most recent big team meeting that we had, the full directorate department thing, you know, the sick leave or the sick absence, including just like colds and flus, because we do still work in the office a wee bit, but the number of people who are off long-term sick has skyrocketed in the last couple of years, and that's really expensive, because you know, you still need that work carried out, right? The reason why the job exists is because there's work that needs to be done. Of course, there needs to be space and capacity for people to go off sick. But if you have someone who's off long-term sick and you don't necessarily know when they're going to return, do you hire in external help? Are you then, like, do you get a temp, like a temporary worker in to do, or like a sub, I don't know what the American or European sort of version of temp is.
Yeah, temp,
Well, no, that would be very British. That's very British English. I didn't know what that was until...
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I moved over here. It's called something different in Danish. Doesn't matter.
Okay,
but yeah, like a temporary worker in. But then you effectively have two salaries going out for the same job, you know, depending on what your health benefits is and what your setup is and all of that. But it's really expensive running costs.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's like with so many things in life, the prevention is better than the cure.
No, exactly. And that's the thing, you know, if you have a really robust and secure support network, then people will feel comfortable doing that, but they will also know that they can come before the stuff hits the fan. Right, that they can be vulnerable and that they won't necessarily be punished. I
also know that I manage people in a different way.
Yeah, when you are the manager.
Yeah, when I am the manager, and how I manage my teams, you know, and I do that. I'm very much, I'm not. Yeah, process is important, but I'm also outcome driven. You know, so I didn't micromanage. I didn't say. I would just say to my team member, right, this is the outcome that we need. You know, how you get from there to there is up to you. If you have the knowledge to do it, crack on. If you need any help, come to me. And this is when we want to have it done by, and et cetera, et cetera. You know, and actually, I didn't really care how many hours that took them, so long as it was within their work hours. I didn't expect them, and
you did have that one team member who were taking the absolute piss, and was getting getting a 2 hour task to last 18 hours.
Yeah, but it was just but for the most part, you know, it was just kind of like, and it wasn't unusual for me to be sitting on a Friday afternoon and it being a beautiful day outside, and me turning to the team and just saying, like, guys, if you've got nothing that needs finished by the end of the day and you're in a good place with your work, go and enjoy the afternoon. Yeah. You know, it was... Do
you think that's bits and pieces of your first manager shining through? The way that he was leading by example in your managing career?
Not just my first manager, but lots of... There's like, when I look throughout my life, there's like a very specific primary school teacher that I had who said things and that have stuck with me. There's a couple of teachers from secondary school who's just said things that stuck with me. It's a product of all these things and me putting all the pieces together to go, actually, that makes sense. You know, I'm very logic driven on stuff, and it's just kind of like, that makes sense. You know, I have some not necessarily unique views on things, you know. It's just like religion, or whether we have a soul or not, and these things. And it's kind of like, you know,
you had a very empowered moment when we were in cinema the other day.
I absolutely did. So the latest Bridget Jones movie, we were watching that, and the
science teacher,
the science teacher, you know, came out with you know, he was not a man of religion. He was very much a man of science. And I don't want to spoil the movie, but so if you don't want the spoiler, put your fingers in your ears now. But he was speaking to Bridget Jones' son, and they'd lost their dad, and he was struggling a bit with, because the science teacher previously knocked points off him in a test for drawing the Earth, the atmosphere, stratosphere, etc., and then putting heaven on the outside, and said, look, and took points off him for putting heaven there.
He was also very matter of fact in a different conversation about the life cycle of a fruit fly and how you know, the body decays and then you die and then you become part of the life cycle in a different manner.
Anyway, long story short, he came out with
one of your favorite quotes.
One of my favorite is it's something
facts.
Favorite facts. It's not necessarily a quote, but it's just like, it's that the laws of thermonuclear dynamics. The energy cannot be destroyed; it can only be transferred. Theory, and he explained that his dad's energy continued because energy cannot be destroyed, and it was in everything.
Yeah,
and that's what it is. I mean, we are all made up of stardust.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, we all are made up of stardust, and so that's me. It's just like, it's just because we can't measure a life force or a soul or whatever doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The energy is there. It cannot be created or destroyed. Something must happen to it. So yeah, that's how my brain works, and thinking around these things. So I'm very good, and I have lots of these eureka moments where I just go, because I find another bit of the jigsaw.
Yeah.
That fills a gap in my thinking that I hadn't necessarily been able to try and frame something around. So yeah, I forgot where we started with that bit. I think that's employees and working in it. It does. It really breaks my heart when we have to employ somebody for 40 hours or whatever it be, or 35 hours, and we expect them to be at their desk or doing their job for every minute. People should be employed to do tasks, to complete a function. And if they can do that in 25 hours, great. Do it in 25 hours. Have the rest of the week to yourself.
But that's a thing that also comes with experience, right? This is the conversation that we've had in off mic, but in a different scenario, right? Where you're like, well, am I paying for expertise or am I paying for time?
Yes.
Right? Because what will take you 20 minutes to do on an Excel spreadsheet will take me 5 days.
Yeah.
Right? Should I get paid more or less than you just because it takes me longer time? Right?
Exactly.
And it's like, well, you have a week to do this job. You will get paid X amount. Yeah. You will get paid the same. I will get paid. You can take more jobs on because it will take you 20 minutes. But I know it will take me 5 days to get the same thing done. And therefore, I can't take other projects on. But it's knowing your own capacity. But you should be paid for the expertise. You should be paid for the job. Yeah. And however long it takes you.
It should be outcome driven.
Exactly.
An outcome driven economy. Because if you have an outcome driven economy, you get rid of a lot of the problems that we face with, and not just mental health and people being overworked and stuff like that, but just the things that drive your economy. You have an economy that's driven by skill set and knowledge and et cetera, and not by somebody who's willing just to grind themselves into the ground. Yeah. Or cheat, or whatever it be,
Or people who feel like they're expected to drive themselves into the ground, right? Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I've come up against, and we can talk about that in another episode.
But it's it's like when it comes to somebody's annual review, and everybody expects a pay rise. Yes. But what actually, if you turn around and said to the person, do you know what? Instead, your bonus this year is you're going to get the same money, but it's only a 35-hour week because you've shown capable that you're able to do that in that time. That's a different way to reward somebody. Yeah. And time is way more precious than any money that you can give to people. I think
people fall into two categories. I was very much, when I was younger, I lived to work. Yep. Right? My entire existence was work. Yep. It was all about the job that I was doing. And my identity was so tightly wound up in the work that I was doing. And I think a lot of younger people are that. Yeah. And then I think a shift happens. For some people, it's getting a family. For me, it was not that. For me, it was sort of like just that self-discovery, that whole like, well, they're not going to lose a night's sleep if they lose you, right? You're not irreplaceable. Yeah. And then I was like, wait, if they're not prioritizing me, I need to prioritize me. So I no longer live to work. I work to live.
Yes,
And I think those are the sort of two camps that people fall into. And some people will stay in their camp their entire life. Yeah. And some people will change.
No. Right. It wasn't our intention to split this into 2 episodes, but because I've but
it's an important subject.
Oh,
right?
For
it's
sure.
an important subject. And your experience with this is a lot more hands-on than mine.
Yeah.
So I think starting out with this and hearing your story, I think is really important. I also think that doing this, mental health check-in and figuring out, where are you now? Not just where were you then, but also where are you now, I think is really good process to be in and just check in, especially because, as I said, like I've seen a huge difference in you over the last week, but it's really like leaped forward. Just in time for our time to change into summertime. You've also leaped forward.
Spring forward, fall back,
Yeah, so no, I think this was really good, and it makes me happy to hear that you're feeling better.
Oh, I definitely am.
Yeah.
I absolutely definitely am, and I'm at the stage now where I can't wait to get going, get a new challenge, new work challenge, something to get my teeth into. And I'm being really good when looking at not just going and firing my CV at everything. Is something that I will enjoy. I'm doing a bit of background on organizations and et cetera, to make sure that, that I can prioritize the work-life balance. So
and I definitely think you will. I think you're a bit closer to 12 than you think you are. I think you are probably somewhere between 11:30 and 11:45.
Okay,
I really think like you're almost there. As a little teaser for the next episode, I think I'm probably 3:45 at the moment.
Okay.
On that clock analogy, but we'll definitely get into that on the next episode.
Yes.
Let's sign off for today.
Yep.
As always, thank you for tuning in to Shared Frequencies and the Space Between.
We hope our conversation today has helped you find a little more clarity in your own space between, whatever that may look like.
And remember, it's okay to be a work in progress. We're all just figuring it out, one frequency at a time.
So if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who might need to hear it.
So until next time, keep tuning in and finding the space that works for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.